Hello, hello, hello. How are you guys? Good morning. It's Friday. The weekend is here. Whew, time to chill out. Not for me though. I gotta after I get off of here today, I'm gonna take my little granddaughter, me and my daughter and my son-in-law, and it's that time of year. It's time to get some summer clothes. So we're gonna do that. Um, and then I got to get back here and work. So that is what we are up to today. Now, as far as this stream goes, we are going to listen to, hang on a minute, Dr. Melissa Westendorf. She's going to testify for the defense. She evaluated Anissa Weier. So that's what's on the agenda for today, and it's just going to be her, because I feel like the whole crux of all of this trial, the ultimate goal of the trial is to determine Anissa Weier's state of mind at the time of the crime. The defense is claiming that she was in fear. She believed so fervently in Slender Man that she felt like she had no other choice, because it's really the second prong of what's tantamount to not guilty by reason of insanity. This one's a little complicated legally because she actually took a plea deal. She pled guilty to second degree attempted homicide, and then I think it was use of a deadly weapon, or I'll tell you guys. I'll remember it in a minute. It'll come to me. But anyway, so now it's up to the jury to determine, was she mentally ill at the time, and was her mental illness so great that she could not control her behavior. Meaning you can know right from wrong. You can know that what you're about to do is wrong, but your delusion, in this case, is so strong and so real to you that you cannot stop yourself. That's basically what they're arguing. Now, what I will say is, up until this point, and I have not heard any of the testimony from the doctor yet, but up until this point, there's been a lot of testimony about Slender Man and really about Morgan. and Morgan was in control, and it was all Morgan's idea, and Anissa just went along with it. But when they played some of Anissa's interrogation video yesterday, and I have it included in the playlist where I commentated over it, but I also, in the description of those two videos, have a link for both of the girls' interrogation videos without commentary. So that's there for you guys if you want to go back. But every time you listen to something like that, you hear something new. And it's not because they say something new, obviously. The video is the video. It's not changed. It's just that sometimes it's no different than watching a movie repeatedly, right? You will notice something different each time, and that's because that's how your brain works. I mean, there's a reason behind it, but I don't remember what that's called, but that's not the point. The point is that every time I hear the interrogation videos, I hear something that I didn't pick up on the time before. And some of the language and things that Anissa says in that video, in that interrogation video, leads me to believe that her intention after all of this was said and done was really to be a creepypasta story. She wanted to be a Jeff the Killer. And that's where I stand after yesterday's testimony. But let me say good morning to you guys. Good morning, Mrs. Troy. Mrs. Troy says, Happy Friday, friends. I'm loving spending so much time here with you all. Thanks, Jen, for sharing your knowledge, comedy, and life experiences with us. Well, thank you, Mrs. Troy. I appreciate that. Good morning, Daisy Faye. Happy Friday. Good morning, Ninja Minx. And good morning, Shauna M. Good morning, Carol W. Good morning. Welcome in. All right, y'all ready to get started? All right, here we go.
All right, thank you. Please be seated. We're back on the record.
Yeah, we're back on the record, and we're back with the cameraman person who is just all over the place. I'm going to need less Blair Witch from you, camera operator person. There is a slow zoom. You don't have to just, and then wheeling it around to look at what's being displayed on the monitors.
State versus Weier. The jury's back in the jury box. Parties are prepared to proceed. Attorney McMahon, do you have a further witness?
We do, sir. First, we would be calling Detective Michael Carpenter.
All right, thank you.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but
Oh my gosh. It's me. Sorry. I don't know why it did this. It's so weird. It took me out of the screen. Can you guys hear me now? All right. So Chicken Shite says, I was talking to my stepdaughters about this, 14 and 16, and they had trouble believing that either of them really thought creepypasta was true. Interesting convo overall. Hey, Tosh, good morning. Good to see you. Sorry, you guys. I don't know. Sometimes no, it's me. I'm the problem. Um, s- sometimes, Streamlabs takes me off. I don't know why. Anyway, let me get back to what I was trying to talk about. So, um, I have a hard time believing that Anissa truly believed that Slender Man was real. To me, based on um, just everything that I've heard thus far, it really, to me, sounds more like what she really wanted. Her ultimate goal was to be a creepypasta story herself. And one of the things that I caught yesterday that I didn't pay attention to, or it didn't strike me the day we listened to her interrogation, was the talk about when she was describing Jeff the killer. She said his hair is like mine. It's cut like mine. And it made me think back to the time that we're talking about, which would have been 2014. And Scene Girls was the hairstyle. To me, the things that they're interested in and the way that they dressed and all that stuff sort of reminds me of some of it, like a mesh between like a scene girl, goth, that, hybrid of something like that. Like little pieces that they liked of, different things, and they just made it, you know, their own style, right? That cut that she has isn't an actual it I think it was intentional. I think that she told the hairdresser to cut her hair like that. I think she described Jeff the Killer's haircut, and that's what the hairdresser gave her. That's what I think. I don't think it was a coincidence. I think it was intentional, and I think that, she that was her ultimate goal. I think that for Morgan, I think that I think Morgan did believe in Slender Man. I do. And I think they're both a continued threat. That's how I feel. I worry for Morgan because so much of her um, no longer being or diminishing the potential threat to society relies on her taking her medication consistently all the time. And that's really hard for some schizophrenics to do. And I just that's what concerns me. It concerns me because she was able to, at points while she was being held in the psychiatric facility, that and this is a psychiatric facility for people who commit crimes. Okay, this is not just, some privatized, mental health facility where, they're not dealing with criminals, because that this is that's not where she was sent to. So she was monitored very closely, not only like in person, right, with the staff there, but also on cameras. And she was still able to get away with not taking her medication. And there were other things that she did too, but we're going to get into that. Hey, good morning, Violet. Happy Friday, babe. Good to see you. Okay. So let's get into it. This is the digital forensics expert that the defense has decided to call. So prepare yourself for more pictures. Although, actually, no, because this would be digital. Duh, Jen. So this is all the stuff that was, like their emails and stuff on their phones and their like laptops or computers or tablets or iPads. All right, here we go.
To choose to help you guys.
I do. Hi, thank you. Good afternoon. Please be seated, pull up to the microphone, and then state your full name and spell your last name.
Michael Carpenter, last name spelled C-A-R-P-E-N-T-E-R.
All right, thank you.
Detective Carpenter, where do you work?
At the City of Waukesha Police Department.
And did you become involved in a stabbing investigation of a young lady by the name of Payton that occurred on May 31st of 2014?
Yes.
So Tosh says the place Morgan was at is where they wanted to send Taylor Shabusiness. I mean, exactly. That's my, thank you for that, babe. I appreciate it. Sometimes just the details. I don't know. Maybe it's me getting older. Who knows? Anywho. Yeah. See, this isn't, like, it's sort of like, okay, you guys know, Chris Watts, right? Chris Watts is not at Big Boy Prison. He's at a diagnostic center. That's where they send that's where they send prisoners or criminals. And that's where they evaluate them and determine the best placement for them. Okay. It's like, prison with training wheels. It's not even Big Boy Prison. Okay. And so, but where they wanted to send Taylor Shabusiness and where they did send Morgan, that is not like a diagnostic center. That is where they send criminally insane, violent offenders. Okay. So it's no joke. And if she was, I just can't figure out how she was, I can't figure out I can't figure out how she was able to get away with the amount of things that she seemingly was able to get away with there. And I'm sure Tosh says, no, it's fine. It's part of the reason Morgan pushed to be released. Look, it's not where I would want to be. Okay. But between being there and being in prison, because when they diagnose criminals, right? When they diagnose somebody who's been convicted of a crime, part of that diagnostics is, they have to take into account your actual crime, right? This is part of the reason why Letitia's, boo-hooing, because she doesn't think that she is similarly situated. I have news for you, ma'am. You are. You committed and were convicted of committing murder. So guess where you're going to be placed with? Other murderers. Same thing with Morgan. So, I mean, I wouldn't want to be in either one of those places, whether it be prison or a psychiatric facility. Hell no, I wouldn't want to be there. But, it is what it is. All right, let's keep going.
I did.
And what was your role in it?
I'm a detective with the computer forensics unit, and I was asked sometime after May 31st, I believe it was the beginning of June 2014, to examine several devices that were collected as evidence.
Morning,
and do you remember what devices you examined?
I believe it was one of them was a cell phone, I believe, belonging to Anissa Weier. I cannot recall exactly what brand at this time. An Apple iPad from Anissa Weier, and I believe it was a Dell PC and a Kindle tablet from Morgan Geyser.
Okay. And did you develop reports regarding what you found?
Yes.
And who did you provide them to?
Detective Casey.
Okay. And specifically thinking of the Geyser PC, did you do any type of search of that personal computer?
Yes.
And what did you do?
The first thing I did was make an exact duplicate of the hard drive, and then I ran the image of that hard drive against several forensic software programs. I believe they were, one was called FTK, Forensic Toolkit, and the other was Internet Evidence Finder.
Okay. And the purpose for doing that is what?
To locate any evidence that might be pertinent to the investigation is information that Detective Casey would have been looking for.
Have a good day,
And
Sarah.
how would you determine what evidence was pertinent to the investigation? Where would you get your information?
Sometime prior to conducting the search, I had received information from Detectives Trussoni and Detective Casey. I believe it was information obtained during their interviews of Anissa Weier and Morgan Geyser, certain keywords they were looking for, such as Slender Man, Jeff the Killer, things of that nature.
Okay. And did you run a search of the Geyser computer for those things?
Yes.
And did you find entries that seemed to indicate that those words had been searched?
Yes.
And did you do anything with that information?
I created a report out of it, placed it on the disk, and turned it over to Detective Casey.
Okay. And the report that you generated was not of everything that was found on the Geyser computer, correct?
Correct.
It was just related to the information that Detective Casey and Detective Trasani had provided you.
Yes.
And the report, how did you generate it? What did you use?
The program I used for that specific report was called Internet Evidence Finder.
And did you eventually develop a Firefox web history?
Yes.
And you see on the screen in front of you and above you what to me looks like something I would never be able to read. It's computer jargon, correct?
Yes.
And when you open it, it shows what the searches were, correct?
Just for clarification, the links that are shown aren't necessarily a keyword search that was performed on that computer. It means I did a keyword search on Internet Evidence Finder, and it said these foundings, whether it's Slender Man or whatever it may be, were found someplace in that web path.
So based on requests from Detective Casey and Detective Trasani, you searched and it pulled those particular websites out of the, or web searches out of the Geyser computer.
Correct.
And then you provided that information to Detective Casey, correct?
Yes.
And the idea behind the links, these are called links, right?
Yes.
One of the few computer terms I know. It's that you have the ability to trace where someone has, or to go where someone went. It's like a path, right?
I don't know if trace would be the appropriate word, but it would just open up the web page as it was seen in that point in time, if it still existed.
Okay, so the majority of them seem to deal with Slender Man, the Creepypasta Wiki, Jeff the Killer. There were other things that Detective Trasani and Detective Casey asked you to look for too, correct?
Correct.
And you kept those, like the Slender Man. Was that pulled up in relation to something they asked you for? Or?
That I'm not positive of.
Okay.
What was that? What was your answer?
I'm not positive.
But all of this information was provided directly to Detective Casey after he had asked you to look for certain terms.
Yes.
And after that, in your report, you noted any further evidentiary value would have to be generated by Detective Casey.
Yes.
So the intent was to research, apparently.
I'm sorry.
It appears that there was an attempt to gather information on creepypasta on the parts of the Waukesha Police Department and Slender Man.
Yes.
And that was your understanding of what you were doing, is gathering that information in relation to the particular case that you were working on.
Yes.
And you have no way to know whether any of the officers actually looked at the information on this screen.
No, I do not.
So if they had wanted to, they could have gone here, for example.
And I apologize, I didn't see which link you actually clicked on.
Observer symbol.
What was that? Observer?
Symbol.
It's
Again, I just don't understand the point of this. Looking at their internet searches, both girls, right? Yeah, we get it. They were into Slender Man. But I don't understand how that gets them to what they have to prove in this case, what they have to prove here in this trial. I'm so confused. Hey, Margie, good to see you, babe. Welcome in. All right, here we go. I don't understand this. Like, okay, no, I'm not gonna show it because, yeah, I am. Hold on, I need to add. There's a This is how I feel about this right now. Like, I don't get. I need to. There's a voice clip of that, so you can actually hear Peter be like, "Oh my God, who the hell cares?" His voice is deeper than mine, but you take my meaning. Anyway, I don't understand the point of this. I really don't. And I wonder if the jury does, because here we go.
a possibility. I can't say that a link that was looked at on that computer in January of 2014 would appear the same today as it did 3.5 years ago.
Okay. Thank you. Nothing further.
Cross-examination.
He has no questions.
Yeah, let it go.
Thank you.
You're right.
Was Attorney McMahon?
One second.
Was the material you showed on the computer part of an exhibit?
It was not a part of an exhibit, Your Honor. Detective Casey had looked at it yesterday and wasn't able to really talk about what it was, and therefore the person who generated it was produced.
No, but what you used today, is it an exhibit today?
It could be if the court wishes.
I think since you showed it on the screen, it has to be an exhibit.
I mean, hello?
So how would you name it?
I would name it the Firefox web history.
And is it a police document or a police disc?
Yes, sir.
All right. Is there a particular disc that it's on that's like
It is.
has an evidence number
Certainly.
that we previously used?
It was not previously used, Your Honor. We had uploaded the information.
No, I
to
meant
the-
as previously used, excuse me.
For Pete's sake, I'm skipping.
Yeah.
Internet evidence finding exhibits become a. Then are you, Detective, I believe you're complete.
I would,
Judge, are you okay with me for?
Yes. Yeah, ma'am, right up here. Then if you'd stay standing, raise your right hand, circle swear you on.
Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Okay, thank you, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
The
Hang on, I muted myself when I meant to, when I meant to actually speak. So Tosh says, well, I think if anything, Morgan needed to be in a legit psych ward. I think she thinks violently, but doesn't have the courage to act. Her drawings to this day are super concerning. I would agree. I'm concerned. All right, here we go. Let's listen to this doctor.
pull up to the microphone. It's the bar with the red light.
Grab some water here.
Sure, go ahead, it's fine. Then state your full name and spell your last name.
Melissa Westendorf. Westendorf.
All right, thank you.
Dr. Westendorf, I am placed at the witness stand two exhibits. First one I want to draw your attention to is Exhibit W. Can you take a look at that?
Yes,
And do you recognize that?
I do.
And what is that?
This is my curriculum vitae.
Okay, so Exhibit W is your CD.
Correct.
Okay. And who prepared that?
I did.
Okay, and are you the person that sent me a copy of it?
Hey, thank you, Nature Rocks. 23 members, 23 months of membership. Thank you so much for supporting me and the channel. I appreciate it very, very much. Thank you.
The CD?
I did.
Is that CD an accurate, up-to-date in regards to your education, training, your employment, and other history in the field of psychology?
It is.
So I want to start with your educational background. Can you go over your educational background for me?
Sure. I received my bachelor's in psychology from the University of Iowa, and then I received I attended a joint degree program. I earned my law degree from Villanova University in 1999, and then I earned my PhD in clinical psychology from Hahnemann University, which is Hahnemann, in 2002.
And have you been involved in any internships?
I did. As a part of earning a PhD in clinical psychology, you have to do a formalized one-year internship. And I did that internship at the Milwaukee County Mental Health Complex.
Okay, and I believe you just said that that's a part of the training that all psychologists have to go through in order to begin work as a psychologist.
Right. Those who are earning their PhD have to do these internships to complete the program.
Okay. And can you describe the internships that you were involved in?
So when I say internship, my formalized internship occurred after my classwork, and in that I was considered the forensic intern, and so I did evaluations for Milwaukee County, forensic evaluations. I also then worked on mental health units, working with chronically mentally ill people who have been placed in a hospital due to various behaviors. I also worked on the juvenile unit, a similar situation, juveniles who were placed in the mental health unit to care for their mental health needs. I did outpatient therapy as well, both with juveniles and with adults.
Okay, so a lot of your practice when you were doing internships involved working with children.
It did. When you say internships, I also did what formerly we call practicums while I was in graduate school. And there I had a forensic rotation doing juvenile evaluations, forensic evaluations. And then I worked in the Philadelphia Child Guidance Center, which is doing therapy with children and families. So yes, I had multiple experiences related to working with youth and families.
Okay, and you used a phrase that I want to make sure the jury understands. You said forensics evaluations. Can you describe what you mean by that?
Sure. So there's a difference between a clinical psychologist and a forensic psychologist. A clinical psychologist is the person who does therapy with the individual, meets with them over the course of either brief therapy or longer therapy, and works on their mental health issues. A forensic psychologist comes in and typically, so there are legal questions that we're helping the court to answer as related to how does the psychological piece fit into this. The forensic psychologist comes in and they look at all the evidence that's provided to them or that is part of the case. And they come in with an objective piece. They want to look at all the information objectively. And they meet once, but maybe twice with the individual depending on the issues that are involved.
Okay. And I wanted to ask you a question about, you said you have a law degree. Is one of the reasons you got your law degree was to assist you in doing your forensics evaluations?
Initially when I went into that, I really liked the intersection of law and psychology, how psychology, the mental health law, so to speak, the family law, criminal law, that was very interesting to me. And so it does certainly inform my forensic work because it helps me understand the legal process and what's asked of me when I do a forensic evaluation.
Okay. So, in what fields are you licensed right now?
I have my license in psychology for the state of Wisconsin. I also maintain a license for my law degree as well.
And do you belong to any type of boards?
I have. In the past, I used to sit on the Wisconsin Licensing Board. I did a 3 or 4 year term with them. I was a part of the American Psychological Association. They had a committee on legal issues, and so we would meet and work on policies for the American Psychological Association related to those issues. And then I've been part of many memberships, the American Psychological Law Society. I've been part of the Racine County Bar Association. Let's see, what else? The Wisconsin Psychological Association. There's an intersection of forensic and correctional psychology. So I'm not current on all of them, but in various times throughout my career, I've been part of these organizations.
And now let's talk about your current employment. You're currently employed where?
I maintain a part-time position with the state of Wisconsin doing forensic evaluations, and then I also maintain an independent private practice as well as a forensic psychologist.
Okay. And let's talk about your part-time position first. How long have you worked in that position?
That particular position I've had since 2011.
Okay. And your private practice, what is your private practice?
It's my private forensic practice. I've maintained this practice since 2003 when I became licensed.
Okay. And what is the name of the private practice that you are involved in?
It's Melissa J. Westendorf, JD, PhD, SC.
Are you also involved in, your CV mentions the Technology Wellness Center. Could you explain what that is?
Sure. In 2013, I joined forces with a colleague of mine that I went to school with, and we formed the Technology Wellness Center. And we formed this center to help parents and kids manage a healthy use of their electronic devices and technology. In the course of my practice, my forensic practice, I was having more and more cases involving the internet, or what we call technology overuse, but almost the addictive quality of electronic devices. And it was concerning to me because these kids were ending up in the legal system. And so we formed the company to help teach parents some of the problems with using the internet and using electronic devices, and to talk with kids about the dangers that are out there regarding using these devices. And then we also, I presented to both those groups, and I've also presented to, say, social workers, other professionals who work with kids, and giving advice on how to work with them. Our goal is to teach people how to have a healthy balance between using their electronic devices and having a healthy lifestyle.
Okay. So in 2012, you recognized that there were some dangers involved in the internet.
It was certainly before then. It was when I joined forces. We wrote a book to help parents, give them kind of a primer, what you'd call a primer on some of the issues that they really need to be aware of.
Okay, and have you gone to like schools and things to give presentations at schools regarding that?
Right. I've been brought into schools to talk to middle schoolers and high schoolers, and then I usually do a parent presentation afterwards. And I've also presented in a couple different states. In Illinois, I've talked with other, I would say, counselors or social workers who work with kids.
Okay. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about the forensics psychology work that you've done. Have you testified in court before?
I have.
And have you ever testified in court as an expert regarding the issue of not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect?
Yes.
And has there ever been a time when you have been determined not to be qualified to testify regarding that issue?
No.
Okay. Judge, I believe the state has maybe stipulated to her being an expert. If not, I'm going to ask that she be found to be an expert in the area of assessing the issue of not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect.
I'll permit the evidence to stand as it's been received and have the testimony go forward.
And doctor, how did you get involved in this particular case?
I was called by the court to perform an evaluation on Anissa.
Okay, so you were not called by the district attorney's office?
No.
You were not called by my office?
No.
Okay. Has there been times in the past, though, that you've been contacted by the district attorney's office to do evaluations?
Sure.
And have there been times when they contacted you to do not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect evaluations?
I have been contacted by them. There have probably been a couple cases that have related to this particular issue.
Okay. And have there been times when you've been called by the defense to do not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect evaluations?
Yes.
Has there been times when you have reached conclusions maybe different from what the person that hired you were expecting you to reach?
So there certainly are times when I cannot support the particular position of the party that has hired me.
When you approach not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect evaluation, what's your process? How do you go about approaching the NGI issue?
So as a forensic psychologist, what I do is I try to obtain first as much information that is available or that's part of the evidence of the case. And so what's really important to me is police reports associated with whatever has happened, witness accounts of what's ever happened. Certainly the criminal complaint is important because it summarizes all that information as well. I also try to find if there's been any mental health services that have been involved, and I want that information. Depending on the age of the person, I want education information. I will then also speak with people involved in the person's life, including whether it's parents or spouses, teachers, therapists if they're involved, anybody that might help me understand the individual at the time the offense occurred. I will also then, if they've been located within a facility or in custody, then I try to obtain that information as well, any documents that are prepared in the normal course of their business as they supervise someone. And then wherever that information may lead me, I might have to look for other information.
Okay. So in this case, there were recorded interviews of the victim. There was a recorded interview of Morgan. There was a recorded interview of Anissa. Did you get complete copies of those interviews?
I received copies and watched the recorded interviews of Anissa and Morgan. I did not receive any recorded information on the victim, but I did have the police report associated with the interviews of the victim.
Okay, and you read that complete
Yes.
report and you watched those entire interviews?
I did.
And the information that you described that you normally obtain for purposes of doing your not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect evaluations, is it common for someone in your position to seek that information when doing their reports?
Yes, it's customary to try to obtain all the information you can. I didn't say it earlier, but I also interview the person who's been accused. But yes, that's the normal course of business as a forensic psychologist, and it's what I do in my practice.
Okay. Now let me ask you this. This is something people might be kind of curious about. You know that the court's asking you to do a not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect plea when he contacts you because that's what you're informed, right?
Yes.
So when you get all of these collateral informations that you just described, do you walk into your assessment determine ahead of time that this is NGI and I'm going to then look at other things that might rule it out, or how do you approach your thought process when you're doing your evaluation?
When you approach these evaluations, you go in and you want to look objectively at all the information. People are responsible for their behavior, and then you start to look at the evidence to see if there's a mental disease or defect that might be part of this. And if you find this, then how did it affect the other two components, or their capacity, to appreciate the wrongfulness, or whether they could conform their behavior. And so I'm looking at the intersection of all of these pieces, and I don't know if a filter is the right description, but, I'm looking to see what is in the totality of the circumstances and all of the evidence that's available, and taking an objective view of that.
Okay. So if I understood you correctly, you go in there with the mindset that this person is responsible for the crime.
That's the assumption, yes.
Okay. And then you look at all the other data that you receive, and then try to figure out what motivated the behavior.
I'm trying to see how all of the evidence fits together, certainly.
Okay. So taking into account your interviews of Anissa and those collateral information that you reviewed, did you reach some conclusions about her?
I did.
And did you prepare a report and then submit that to the court?
I did.
And I want to show you what has been marked as Exhibit X. Can you look at that and then tell me if you can identify that?
Yes, this is my report that I filed or sent to the court on November 4th, 2016, and it appears to be an accurate copy with all pages included.
Okay. And in that report, did you record your observations, your conclusions, your opinions?
Yes.
Okay. Now, there were other doctors that were involved in assessing Anissa. There was Dr. Michael Caldwell. There's also Dr. Gregory Van Rybrook. Did you have their not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect reports with you before you prepared and submitted your report?
No.
And so did you get a chance to consult with either one of those doctors before you submitted your report?
No.
I want to talk about what you were able to find with Anissa. Did you find a diagnosed disorder for Anissa?
Yes, I did diagnose her with a disorder.
And I want to have you look at your report, page 19, and can you tell me what that diagnosis is?
Sure. The name of the disorder is Other Specified Schizophrenia Spectrum and Other Psychotic Disorder, Delusional Symptoms in Partner of Individual with Delusional Disorder.
Okay, and that's a long name. Is that commonly known in another phrase, or?
Yeah, so the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, or the DSM, what people refer to as the DSM, was reorganized a couple years ago, and some of the names have changed. This particular disorder used to be considered shared psychotic disorder, but for whatever reason, it was moved around a little bit and these other words were added, and I don't know the background of that, but in essence, it's the same disorder, it just has a different name. I'm going to use shared psychotic disorder because I think 3 words describes it a little bit better than the 8 or 9 that is included right now, just for ease.
Okay.
Okay, so am I correct in understanding this testimony that basically what she's saying is she has folie à deux, shared delusional disorder? So if she's not, so as long as she is away from anybody who also suffers from delusions, then she won't become part of their shared delusion. Is that what I'm understanding here? Also, good morning, Henry. Henry says, this is an interesting case. Based on the interviews with the accused, I kind of sympathize with them. Controversial opinion. It's not a controversial opinion, I don't think. I think I think they've got some issues. I don't think, hey, Rachel, good to see you. I think they definitely have issues. What those issues are and how can we best address them and also prevent something like this from happening again, I think, um, is really the bigger question, I think. I mean, you know, all right, here we go. Let's see what she says.
And you said you referred to the DSM. Could you explain what that is?
The DSM is a listing of mental health disorders that are people work with, therapists work with, that people have as part of their life. And what they've done is they've tried to organize it in a way with symptoms for each disorder. And so therapists will use this. Certainly it gets used as part of either therapy or evaluations by counselors or forensic psychologists. And it is the treatise that most psychologists use when they are making diagnoses and working with people.
Okay, so that's the treatise that's commonly used by psychologists when forming their conclusions about a diagnosis for an individual.
Psychologists, psychiatrists, all levels of mental health professionals.
So I want to go back to the shared psychotic disorder. What does that mean?
Shared psychotic disorder is a disorder that is, as it indicates, shared between at least two people or more. And you have, in this instance, two individuals, one of which has possibly a more significant, more overt, more observable psychotic disorder. They may have multiple types of symptoms, delusions, hallucinations, whether it's auditory, visual. They might have mood problems. There might be other things going on. And then the second person, in this instance, then shares at least one of those psychotic symptoms. Delusional symptoms is present with this disorder and in this case. The sharing of that. Now that second person may not have any of those other psychotic symptoms. They may not have hallucinations or some of the other things I just talked about, mood problems or cognitive slowing, but they do share this one common disorder, or one common symptom, which is delusions. Now, this is between, like I said, two or more individuals. Typically, there is a special relationship that's between these two individuals. This is not a very common disorder, and in fact, if you look through the literature, the psychological research literature, you don't find studies of 100 people where they've studied this particular disorder. But at best, you get a case study where a psychologist will write or an academic will write on a particular case study that they have or patient that they've encountered. So it is really quite uncommon for this disorder. And I talked a little bit about that special relationship which is required. The special relationship typically involves maybe a parent and child, or maybe spouses. Sometimes it's siblings. In this case, it's unusual because we have two children involved, but it takes a special relationship for this sharing to occur.
Okay, and I want to have you define some of the words that you just used. I think you referred to a delusion, and I wanted you to explain what you mean by a delusion.
Sure. A delusion is a fixed or very persistent false belief that doesn't really change much despite contradictory information given to the individual. In working with people with delusions, you can not argue, but you can give them contradictory information, and they keep that delusion intact. So for example, if a person believes that somebody did a secret surgery on them, took out their organs and replaced them with the organs of somebody else, even if I said to them, well, you don't have any surgical scars, it wouldn't alter that particular delusion. So that's what I'm talking about in terms of contradictory information. It doesn't alter the delusion. I'm not saying the delusion can't change a little bit over time, but that comes from within the person. It's not really necessarily the result of somebody coming in and telling them that's the wrong, that's fake, or that's the wrong belief, or that couldn't happen to you.
Okay. Is there also something referred to as a bizarre delusion?
Bizarre delusions are considered those things that can't happen in normal life. Another example of a delusion would be, perhaps a person has, say, a pain in their toe. but they believe that that pain emanates from an alien person who's inserted a tracking device into their toe, okay? So that's bizarre because aliens aren't inserting tracking devices into our toes, right? But the pain is real, that piece of it is real, but it's what they think about that is delusional.
I want to ask you a question. I heard this mentioned a few times since our trial started. The belief in Santa Claus. Now, Santa Claus is not real. How is that different from a bizarre delusion?
So, that's a culturally accepted, I guess you could call it, it's not a delusion, but it's a culturally accepted norm that we have in society, right? And eventually over time, kids start figuring out that, maybe this isn't real. They start challenging some of the notions that they had about Santa Claus, and they try to, sometimes even trick their parents into confessing, etc. So it's different in that it's culturally accepted. It becomes challenged by the person themselves, by the child themselves, and they outgrow that particular piece.
Okay. You have seen people, other than Anissa, suffering from delusions in the past.
Yes.
In cases where you've had people that you've evaluated who suffered from delusions, have their families always picked up on that and noticed that?
No, not necessarily.
And is there always possible for, even let's say someone's a student and they go to school every day and they see the same teachers every day, is it always common or possible or observable by a teacher that you might come in contact with every day?
So with delusional disorder, people can behave in very normal ways when you're not tapping the delusion, so to speak. I've done many evaluations, people who have delusional disorder, when I can talk with them about their family, their education, their work history, and you wouldn't know that they had a delusional disorder.
All right, I just need to pause here for some commentary under fair use. I think that using Santa Claus is a poor example. And the reason why is because there was somebody named St. Nicholas. So, and I believe his name was Nicholas Klaus. And so I don't know that that is a good example to use, because certainly there is literature out there and studies that exist that suggest that the story is based on a real person, where Slender Man, Jeff the Killer are wholly and completely made up. They are a complete and total work of fiction. So I think that using Santa Claus as an example is a poor example, because it's based on an actual person. Now, is there an actual person? You know what? I've seen a couple of different things, chicken shite. I don't know. I think he's Scandinavian. I think it's been a long time since I did any, like looking into it or whatever. And I don't even remember why I was looking into it. Who knows? I probably was looking into something else a long time ago and saw something about it and just was like, hey, let me click. Another example of that would be the Pied Piper. Okay. That story where he came into a town that was overrun by rats, and he negotiated with the mayor, I think is the story, but that he would play his pipe and he would get rid of all the rats. And he did that. And then when he came back, after he'd done that, he came and he wanted his money, and they stiffed him on the bill. Okay. So then he came back another time, right? And he played his pipe, and he lured the children away. That is based on something that did happen, but they actually attribute the loss of the children to something that's called the Children's Crusade. And I mean, you can look it all up. It's all there. So there are stories. Some stories are based on some level of reality. It's just, over the years, it's been, twisted. So that's why I don't think that Santa is a good example of that, right? I think that there's probably other things that you could, because as children get older and they have experiences, they have interactions with peers. It typically is around, it depends on the child. For example, my older three stopped believing that Santa brought them gifts at one point, right? But they have a much younger sister. They never said anything. They never told her. They let her figure it out on her own, as most children do. I don't think that's a good example. I just don't.
But the minute I tapped into it and I asked about it, then I would start getting all those beliefs about whatever the delusional system was that they believed. And so it's not uncommon, and the DSM talks about that people with delusional disorder can look very, I don't say normal, but that they can function well in whatever setting that they're in. That toe example that I gave you, I can, unless I start talking about the toe and the pain, that person may never tell me about it. So you can go about your life and have some bizarre delusions, and people may not necessarily detect it.
But let me ask you this. Have you had examples where you were doing interviews with someone and it took maybe hours before you picked up on the delusions that they were experiencing?
Yes, as I said, there have been cases where I know that they're using the not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect plea, that they've entered that, but I've gone in and it can take an hour and a half before some of that starts to come out. And in some instances, what they tell you might be very believable, but when you check it against collateral information like the police reports and you talk to other people, you start to realize, well, okay, maybe they are delusional because what they're saying to me has no basis as to what other people are reporting.
Now I want to talk to you about the shared psychotic disorder as it applies to Anissa. How does that apply to her?
With the shared psychotic disorder and applying in this situation, if you remember what I said is that there's a primary person, the one who has more overt symptoms, has multiple types of symptoms as a psychotic disorder. I believe in this case, after looking at all the evidence, that Morgan is the one that was the primary. And Anissa was what's considered interchangeably called the recipient or the submissive or the secondary person. And what they had in common was the delusion about Slender Man and what they needed to do to go to Slender Mansion, and all of the characters associated with Slender Man. Jeff the Killer, I'm not recalling the other ones, but there were some other names, some other killers or proxies that were associated with this delusion. And
You know what they haven't gotten to, and this is what I really am curious about? I want to know how long Morgan and Anissa were hanging out before Anissa told Morgan about Slender Man. That's what I want to know. Because if, for example, they had only been hanging out, maybe they'd been hanging out a week or two or something like that, a short period of time, right? And that's, and Anissa brings it up. That's very different, and it would make me think differently, right? If I found, if it were, they hung out for a month or two, and then Anissa introduced Slender Man and Creepypasta to Morgan, because Morgan, as soon as Morgan found out about Slender Man and Creepypasta and it captured her interest, she shared it with Payton. She was emailing her stuff, telling her stuff. So if it were quickly, then I would think probably it might be something that Anissa actually believed in, right? But if it were after a period of time, it would make me question the motive here. Did Anissa hang out, spend time with Morgan, and determine that Morgan would be the perfect person to tell this to exploit some issue that Morgan had going on that maybe Anissa couldn't quite name, right? But certainly was aware of. I would be curious about that. Tosh says, from what I know, and this is just secondhand knowledge, but it was within a week of meeting. Well, if that is the case, that certainly gives me pause. There is something about the way that Anissa was during that interrogation. When you take away any emotion towards the actual crime and you just look objectively at the words that are coming out of her mouth, okay? Like you have to move past the, oh my God, I can't believe a 12-year-old is the one sitting here and talking about this in such a cold fashion. If you take all of that away and you strip it down just to the words that she uses, it's the haircut conversation that she had with the detective. It's the her asking how many stab wounds there were. And then when she's told the answer, which is 19, and she comes back with, well, Morgan said she counted 17 and then goes on to list where some of these stab wounds were. There's just something about it to me altogether that makes me believe that Morgan, that Anissa's true motive was being a creepypasta story herself. The way that she was so intent on the detective getting certain details right, and the things that she wanted added in after the detective read the story, read this, the synopsis back to her that she ended up signing, there's just something about that just doesn't sit quite right with me, and in agreeing with some of the determinations from the professionals. I don't know. I can't help it.
And so it was their relationship that sort of gave the groundwork for the transference or the sharing of this delusion.
Okay. And you said that your opinion is that Anissa was the secondary and Morgan was the primary. I want to show you a clip, and I want to...
Hold on. And there's another situation. This is why I don't believe that Morgan had a shared delusion. Anissa had delusions, because there is an email exchange between Anissa and Morgan where Anissa is apologizing to Morgan. This is before the murders occurred, obviously, for lying and saying that she saw Slender Man. So why are you apologizing and saying that you lied? See, here's the problem with that whole situation, right? Either you're lying now when you're apologizing and saying you didn't see Slender Man, which makes no sense in the context of this case, but let's just go with it, right? Either she's lying about lying and seeing Slender Man, and she actually did see Slender Man, right? Or she lied when she said she saw Slender Man, right? But either way, you're a liar. So, that's the problem. All right, here we go.
You said that you reviewed the entire interview of Anissa. I just want to show you a short clip.
That one of them, my friend Kelly gave me this one. Oh. Their niece, my nieces and nephews made me the rubber band one. Okay. Okay. All right. I will be right back with you. Okay. Just give me a couple minutes. Okay. About Morgan, she can be a little jumpy and might get off task and look around and forget what she's saying in the middle of the sentence a lot. Okay. Because, like, she said she hears voices too, but I just wanted to tell you. So we're aware of that? Maybe not put off by that then? Okay. Well, thank you for telling me that. Okay.
Okay, and I wanted you to
See, okay. Wendy says, Morgan said she didn't know how many times she stabbed her. She didn't count. And if Anissa didn't watch, how did she know close to how many times she stabbed her? Exactly. There's some conflicting stories here. And it gives me pause. And Neat says, but before I say what Neat said, hey, Creme Crochet Coiffe, how you doing, babe? I hope you're feeling better. Neat says, I think the doctors got it right. I think that Anissa has issues, okay? I'm not saying that she doesn't. What I think is, I don't think that the issues that Anissa Weier suffers from, or has, I should say, I'm not going to say suffers from. I don't think the issues, psychological issues that Anissa Weier has qualify her for the true definition under the law of not guilty by reason of insanity or mental defect. I think she absolutely can control her behavior. So Henry says the prosecution needs to refine their argument, even if it can be demonstrated that the accused believed in Slender Man. The question is, was it reasonable and correct to follow his instructions? So in this trial, okay, what's happened so far with Anissa is that Anissa has pleaded guilty to second-degree attempted homicide or attempted murder. And there's something about a weapon in there, or use of a deadly weapon, with the use of a deadly weapon. So this is not the prosecution's case. It's the defense's case. It is solely and wholly on the defense. The burden is on them to prove that Anissa meets the criteria for not guilty by reason of insanity or mental defect. That's what they're determining in this trial. Basically, where will she spend her time? Because she's already pleaded guilty. And then, so I think that the secondary prong of the not guilty by reason of insanity was the mental illness to such a degree that the person at the time they could appreciate the wrongfulness of their actions, but they couldn't stop themselves. They couldn't control their behavior. That's what it's the second part of the not guilty by reason of insanity or mental defect that I don't think that Anissa fits. That's what I'm trying to say in my big old long Miss America answers. Here we go.
hear that, doctor, because that's towards the beginning of Anissa's interview. And in the beginning of her interview, she's sharing with Detective Trusani some concerns about Morgan. Does that factor into your conclusion about Anissa being the secondary?
Yes, what's really interesting about this, the secondary can often help keep the primary person together, so to speak. They can do some caretaking for that primary person. And when you look at this, I mean, this is what she's doing, right? She is trying to help the detective say, hey, Morgan sometimes, you can't understand her, she gets confused, she just wanted the detective to know. And I think the detective said, okay, so not to be put off by that, or something to that effect. That shows the type of relationship that they have. and it shows how the secondary can help along the primary maintain at least some semblance of just caretaking for that primary person.
I mean, I do agree with, there are many times in that interrogation where Anissa, when she's talking about some of the things that occurred after the stabbing, where she's clearly the caretaker. And I think the problem here is I don't think that I think that there's a difference between what she's talking about, this doctor being Morgan being the primary person, and then the leader. I think there are two different things. I think that in this scenario, the way that the doctor is testifying, just because Morgan is the one with the primary delusion, she shows more signs and symptoms of having a delusional disorder, doesn't mean that she was the leader. And I think that that's an important distinction, and I hope they get to it. And also, good morning, in my opinion, allegedly, don't come for me. Good morning, good to see you. And this is really this is a good question too. Caretaking or grooming? How much of what went on in the relationship, the dynamics between Morgan and Anissa, was Anissa fanning the flames and encouraging these delusions? And how much of it was actually caretaking? What is Anissa's true motive for telling the detectives what she said? Is it that she's caretaking, or is it that she is getting ahead of everything and saying, listen, she hears voices, she's jumpy, don't listen, don't believe all the things that come out of her mouth. She ain't all there. I mean, is that what she's doing? And how do you even determine that? How does a mental health professional determine whether or not the difference between caretaking and manipulating the detective? A self-serving statement, as it were. All right, let's keep going.
Before we go further, where was it on your inventory of clips? I'm looking at Exhibit F1.
And Your Honor, we are in the process of generating a new one. Our computer person is in Madison and is supposed to be placing the time stamps in it. And I just sent him a reminder that he needs to get that done pronto.
So does that mean we don't have it?
At this second,
right?
No, Your Honor.
We should just return at a certain point and put it in the record.
We will.
Okay. All right, very good.
And Doctor, I think you also mentioned something about symptoms that the two are experiencing. Is there something about what you know about Morgan that helped you determine that Morgan was the primary in this case?
And just really quickly before I forget, this is really why I wanted to cover this case, because I think that there's a bigger conversation to be had here. I think one part of the bigger conversation is, how do we deal with children in the justice system, in the criminal justice system? That's number one, from beginning to end, right? How do we treat them when they are the suspects of a crime? And then moving through the justice system, right? How do we handle that? Then how do we handle children who might have mental health issues? And three, how do we handle mental health issues in general, even with, including with adults in the criminal justice system? And I would say that the United States, I don't know about other countries, I don't live there, but in the United States, I don't think we're doing a good job on any of those fronts. I think if we were to be graded, I think we would get an N, needs improvement. I think we have a long way to go.
based on some of the, the information that I received in evidence, I was suspecting that she might have been the primary. And then I was able to obtain 3 reports of Morgan that were looking at different legal questions related to this case. And in there, the psychologist reviewed documents where she went after the interview and how she was, the symptoms she was manifesting, the disorders that or disorder that she was diagnosed with. And so it helped establish or verify my belief that she was, or she is the primary in that relationship. And it's consistent because she was diagnosed with schizophrenia. She demonstrated multiple psychotic symptoms with the hallucinations and the delusions. And there's indications that these delusions and hallucinations were occurring, well prior to what happened in May of 2014.
Okay, and these were reports prepared by 3 child forensics doctors, right?
They were 3 forensic psychologists.
Okay, and in Anissa's interview, you looked through the entire interview, there were points in the interview where she started to express some doubts, I guess, about Slender Man. Did that help you in terms of your assessing who the primary and the secondary was?
It made sense to me. So when you're shared psychotic disorder, a long time ago, had a French phrase. It was called folie à deux. Called folie à deux, which is F-O-L-I-E, and then there's a space A, and then a space D-E-U-X, which means madness shared by 2. Okay, and in that relationship, I'm sorry. Can you restate the question one more time?
Okay. Anissa, during her interview, she made comments that appeared to be divorcing herself from the delusion after she was separated from Morgan. Did that play a role in your determining who the primary and who the secondary was?
Right. So the way they used to treat this, which is where I was going for, the way they used to treat it, they thought that separation was enough to help break that delusional connection, and that in time, because this person was technically healthier than what the primary person was, that over time they would lose the delusion or begin to challenge themselves, begin to have better contact with reality as related to the delusion. Nowadays, even though this isn't a common disorder, sometimes people do need antipsychotic medications. The secondary needs antipsychotic medications or group therapy or individual therapy. They may need some additional assistance other than just separation. But separation is crucial to help break, sort of that, the intertwining of that delusional piece that keeps them together related to that delusional scheme they have.
This is a really good point that Neat Noodle makes. So she says, I feel for her too. I don't agree that all the blame goes to Anissa. I think they were both ill and the friendship created a perfect storm type situation. Okay. So I agree with this. I do not think, I don't think blame is going to is helpful in this situation, right? I feel like this perfect storm situation is not an uncommon theme during crimes, right? And it's something that we've talked about many times during, many discussions on various true crime cases. So blame I don't think would be helpful in this situation, but I do think that understanding exactly what mental health issues each girl has and getting that correct is helpful to understanding how we got here and how we can go forward in preventing something like this. So I'm trying to understand the dynamics. I'll tell you why. Okay, a long time ago, there was a case. I covered it on my channel, but a Lifetime movie was based on it. It's Murder Among Friends. It's with Patty Duke and Tiffany Amber Thiessen. Okay, that I think she just goes by Tiffany Thiessen now. But anywho, it was based on the Missy Avilia story. Okay. It happened. And at the crux of it was there were a group of 4 girls, and Missy and I cannot remember her name, were the original 2 best friends, and the other girls got added after the fact. But the second girl, Michelle Severson, is that it? I know her last name is Severson, but Severson was incredibly, incredibly jealous of Missy and actually didn't really like her. She actually loathed her. And I remember watching that and, thinking how would a person how would a person suspect that of their own friend, right? And, I watched that as a teenager, and then I had kids. One time it was during summer, and my oldest daughter had a friend over, and they were playing on the Wii, and they were playing Just Dance, and they were taking turns instead of doing it together. And I came into the living room from the kitchen, and I was just checking and seeing what was going on. And I was watching my daughter's friend watch her. And the look on her face actually scared me. I'm not even, you guys know, I'm not dramatic and I'm not a pearl clutcher. But I thought right then, this girl hates my daughter. I don't even know why she's here. And I told my daughter about it. So I think that understanding these dynamics is really, really important. And I also think there's an element to this that is unique to just this age group of girls, too. Some of the behaviors that occurred between Anissa and Morgan are pretty typical for that 6th grade. Junior high is a rough time for girls. It really is. But so I think some of the stuff that we're seeing is part and parcel with being a junior high girl. All right, let's keep going.
Another thing that I believe you would have reviewed is some comments that Payton made about Anissa when she was outside of the presence of Morgan. I believe she described Anissa as being nicer to be around when Morgan's not present. Did that factor into your decision about who the primary and who the secondary is?
Yeah, I guess that really goes to their relationship, and that Anissa, I don't want to say became a different person, but that relationship brought out different things in Anissa. And when she was away from Morgan, the victim said that when she was in the presence of Morgan, she was mean and rude and, would hit her. But outside of the presence, Anissa had apologized for her behavior, and she was much nicer to the victim. And so the victim's perceptions was that Anissa was doing this as part of the relation, or not, she didn't describe it as relationship, but to impress Morgan or to. It was just different with Morgan. Now, Anissa's father had also said that it seemed as though Anissa was sillier when she was with Morgan than with maybe other girls or other friends.
Okay. And is that something you would expect to see when the secondary and primary are together? Primary might be affected by the secondary?
There are no expectations because this is, so rare, but it fits into that pattern. It fits into that relationship dynamic that I've talked about.
Also, actually, if you want to know who's gotten the most blame in this whole deal, it's Creepypasta, and Slender Man. They're the ones that have gotten more blame than anybody in this situation, and I don't think they're to blame at all. If they are to blame, right, then any kid in that age range that read those stories and looked into it, then wouldn't they all have been out there offering their friends up to Slender Man? But that didn't happen. And that's because it's not actually, the problem isn't in Creepypasta. It isn't in the Slender Man story. It isn't in Jeff the Killer's story. The problem exists in the person who is viewing and reading and taking in that material. So there will always, I mean, what about people that commit murder in the name of religion? Should we ban all religious text? Do you see, you take my meaning? It exists in the person. It has nothing to do with what they're reading or what they're viewing, because otherwise, you would see it happening over lots of people, right? It exists in the person. So I think the important thing is to identify correctly. And here's where this is where it's problematic as it pertains to the law, okay? And in a courtroom setting like this. This psychologist is limited. Her answers are limited by the questions that she's asked. She just can't sit up there and she's not giving a lecture, right? It's a question and answer session. So that's where I think it becomes problematic. The way that our legal system works limits these types of professionals to only answering the question that they are asked, cannot give a narrative. And an attorney, it's their job to elicit the testimony they want to out of their witness. So I think that's what puts the court and ultimately the juries at a disadvantage, because they can't hear all of the things. They only hear a snippet, and then they base their their verdict on that snippet. I think we need an overhaul when we do not guilty by reason of insanity defense. I think that some things need to change.
So the delusion that Anissa suffered from was what delusion?
She had the delusion about Slender Man, and there was several parts of it, but that Slender Man was a real individual who hunted children, and that he lived in Nicolet National Forest, and that to be a part of his world or to please him, that you needed to become a proxy, and to become a proxy, you needed to kill a friend. And that at that point, then you could become part of Slender Nation, and you would fall under the, she likened it to military, the president, the general, and then the people who follow the general. She likened it to that. You would, do his bidding, so to speak.
The delusion that Anissa had about Slender Man, what may have prevented her from realizing that was a delusion?
There are a lot of factors that go into this. First of all, she was 12, right? And so she was young, and she was looking at the Slender Man, or Creepypasta is the wiki that it's on, website. And she was looking at this website, and this website looks real, right? I mean, it has stories, it has clippings, it has articles that a 12-year-old might have difficulty distinguishing between what's real and not real. I mean, I work with kids who have ran into these problems, and the internet can be there are a lot of things, there can be things on the internet that are difficult for kids to understand are not real. I mean, adults sometimes have problems with it, right? I mean, we hear all sorts of stuff about fake news and articles that aren't real. Just in the recent past, there was a tweet about the wishing Miami International Airport, luck because they were underwater, but that wasn't even real. It was the New Mexico, it was some airport in Mexico, I think. And if adults have trouble with that, 12-year-old kids are going to have trouble with that, because their brain isn't at the place where we're at as adults in terms of being able to discern or being able to have, to analyze, what's real and what's not real. And with this website, it's my understanding that it was after the fact that they posted on the website, that this is fictional, this is not real, it's not intended for anybody. But from my understanding, it wasn't there to begin with. And the deeper you go into it, she had described the website as when you would look at one story, based on what you looked at, it would feed you other stories. Just like, Google does, or, when we're shopping, and then all of a sudden it shows up in our emails, right, that we've been shopping for this. Same concept, really, is that you get an article and then you get additional articles. So you have those two things working together. A third piece of this is that Anissa was brand new to the school that she was at. She had attended an out-of-district elementary school, and now she's coming into middle school in 6th grade, where she doesn't know anybody. And she was, as she described, desperate for friends. She had met Morgan relatively early, I think October, into the school year, and she said, I clung to her for dear life. I mean, she wanted a friend. She had talked about sitting at the lunch table, and no one would, everybody had their friends, and so she was the new girl. So that certainly plays a piece of this whole puzzle, is that she wanted a friend, and and so it's all that put together. She had a common interest with Morgan. They liked the horror stories, the paranormal, and so they had this common interest that brought them together, that they could discuss these issues, not issues, but discuss these stories. The problem was, Anissa would have no idea that Morgan was very susceptible to developing delusions around this, because she had already demonstrated some psychotic symptoms. She had already believed that some of the Harry Potter characters she could talk with, or that was part of what was going on for her. And so there's no way Anissa would know that, but it was the perfect storm of events, if you want to say. She introduced this to Morgan, and then Morgan integrated this into her delusional thinking patterns. And this was shared back with Anissa, and the two of them discussed these stories. And they would discuss them with other people too, a couple other people. But their belief in them and the sharing of that really, it like solidified it, made it a nice, tight, delusional scheme or system that they had between the two. So there's no contradictory evidence presented to either one of them between the two of them, right? And even if there was, Anissa often said, I wanted to prove the skeptics wrong. I wanted to prove the critics wrong. This was real. So again, you have all of these events that are occurring simultaneously that could probably never be recreated again, because it was just this perfect storm of all of these factors.
Okay. And I want to have you talk about something that you just mentioned, because in Anissa's recorded interview, she does say, when she was searching Slender Man on the internet, there were skeptics. So she believed Slender Man was real. She saw evidence that Slender Man was real on the internet, but she also saw people that were skeptics. How do you explain her holding on to those delusional beliefs in the face of that, contradictory evidence there?
She had a real life person that was a partner in the delusional system with her that could help reinforce it. There was probably a transition time, maybe where she had some doubts from time to time. I mean, that would be kind of normal, especially in a developing psychotic disorder. But over the course of time, she was intent to prove these people wrong, that he was real, and that he, could do harm to children and walked around in the woods, but you couldn't see him. I mean, she believed all of that.
Okay. So I want to ask you this. You didn't meet with Anissa in 2014. When did you meet with Anissa in person?
I met with her on September 20th in 2016.
And when you met with her, I think some of the comments that she made to you were different than the comments she made initially after this happened.
Correct.
And do you recall some of the comments that she made to you?
So 2 years later, Anissa is trying to make sense of what's happened in this situation. And she is clearly trying to, what I'd say, divorce herself from having that belief. I mean, she demonstrated a lot of self-loathing and described herself as a monster for doing this. And, imagine this is from 12 to 14-year-old brain trying to make sense of what has happened. I think her father remarked that early on, she said, how could my brain let me do this? So she is psychologically trying to figure out, and she doesn't want to be crazy. She doesn't want that. And so at this point, I think we're seeing the process of her trying to make sense of that and saying, I couldn't have believed that. I don't believe that. But if you go back through the evidence, and if you go back through all the other information, truly believes, as she did believe that. And there were actually indications also in the interview that she still holds on to it. It's changed a little bit, but that she still holds on to it. At one point, I asked her, in the end, you didn't prove either way whether or not Slender Man was real or not real. And she looked at me and she goes, exactly. It told me that she still has a piece of it. And then she goes on to describe, well, if he is real, he must be the devil. And she talked about now having a belief in God, and that, that those are her beliefs, and that if Slender Man is real, he must be the devil. So there's still this piece of it. She wants to intellectually say, I didn't believe that. But her belief and her statements indicate that there's still like that core piece is there, or at least, the core delusional system is there. And just like I talked about, just generally speaking, with shared psychotic disorder or anybody with a delusion, it's not going to stay the same from, the age of 18 to 33. It does change over time.
Okay. So the next question that I would have, which I'm sure I can't imagine it's not going to be asked, but this would based on that testimony, my next question would be, okay, so then what delusions does she currently have?
But the core is still the same.
Okay. So when you met with her, she was 14 years old, right?
She was.
And she was basically talking to you about, again, something that she did when she was 12.
Yes.
And 14-year-olds, you probably had experience with 14-year-olds multiple times, hundreds of times, thousands of times over your years of practicing as a psychologist.
Yes.
And you would probably agree that a teenager doesn't want to be seen as different.
Hey, Mari, good to see you.
Right, I think, yes, I would agree with that statement.
So when you're talking to her at 14, she's trying to divorce herself from those things that made her different from other kids.
Yeah, that's how I interpreted what we're seeing now, or the statements that we're seeing now, is she's just psychologically trying to make sense of this. I mean, adolescence, from puberty on, you're just trying to make sense of who you are and where you are in the world and what the world means. And so now you have this very significant event, this or incident, you have a mental health disorder, and trying to make sense of that that could be overwhelming.
Okay. I believe you looked at some of the account of what happened that she made around the time that this occurred to other, doctors as well. Did you have access to other statements that she's made to other individuals about what happened in 2014?
Yes, there were provided to me were other reports that have been generated based on previous hearings on other legal issues as related to it. And so I had those available to me. And for some of those reports, they talked about the incident, what happened, and her belief in these things. And it was consistent. Those were all consistent.
Did you ultimately reach a conclusion on whether or not Anissa suffered from a mental disease or defect? And by that, I mean an abnormal condition of the mind substantially affecting her mental or emotional processes?
I did.
And what is that mental disease or defect, again, that you diagnosed?
So I'll shared psychotic disorder, but formally, according to the DSM-5, I'm going to read it here, other specified schizophrenia spectrum and other psychotic disorder, delusional symptoms in partner of individual with delusional disorder. And
did you reach an opinion regarding whether, as a result of that mental disease or defect, Anissa lacked substantial capacity either to appreciate the wrongfulness of her conduct or to conform her conduct to the requirements of the law?
I did.
And what was your conclusion regarding that?
I concluded that she could not conform her conduct to the requirements of the law.
And I want you to explain how you and why you reached that conclusion.
So I looked at, the events of the day, of what happened, beginning with when they were first talked about Slender Man, when she introduced Slender Man to Morgan, which was, I believe, in October of 2013. And then in evidence, there are, email exchanges that they had, and there's her report of their discussions. And it pretty much consistently, everybody says in February 2014 is when Morgan came to her and said, we can become proxies by killing a friend. And at that point, the victim was selected. And they went about planning, when it was going to happen or how it was going to happen. And as you fast forward, they made some plans in preparation to do that. And it was over the course of these months that they planned it. They took actions that would accommodate when they would be gone. Say, like Anissa left a note on her phone saying, "Don't miss me, family. You know, you don't deserve me. I'm not perfect," something to that effect. And so I'm looking at all that information. And then I'm looking also at the actual 3 times that, or 3 plans that they come up with during the May 30th to May 31st. And because of their inept plans, how they kept working this, because they had started this plan. This plan was they had to kill someone to become proxies, and then they were walking to Nicolay Forest, right? They got a map of how to get there. All these things, and the 3 plans that they had really indicated that they felt compelled to do it. They felt like they could not comply with the law. They had to do this plan as part of their delusional system. They had to do this plan, and then they were going to walk to Nicolay, and that's what they did, the Nicolay National Forest. That's what they did. They attempted to walk there. And so that evidence indicated to me that they couldn't conform their behavior to the requirements of the law.
Okay, so she was willing to leave her family behind and walk to Slender Mansion and Nicolay National Forest. Did that impact the conclusion that you reached?
Right, I think that just further supports the belief of the compelling nature. This is a 12-year-old girl, or these are 12-year-old girls who are willingly giving up their family because they feel that they have to do it. Otherwise, Slender Man may come back and harm their families. And at some point, Anissa really believed that if she didn't go with, that Morgan might successfully get there and come back and kill her family. And despite having what she called mental breakdowns along the way, I'm assuming these were because of the trauma that had happened, that these were a lot of anxiety and fear and feeling very scared, these moments, they continued on their path. I mean, they considered, should we give up? But they couldn't. They had to keep going.
Okay. And as they were going, they reported seeing Slender Man as they were walking to his mansion. Did that in any way impact your conclusion?
I think it's consistent with what I've said before. At some point, they come to a tree and they mark an X on the tree, I think in a circle, but I'm not sure about that, but an X on the tree, and then Morgan said some sort of, I think she described as weird poem, and she felt that she saw Slender Man out of the corner of her eye, adding, but he's really quick, you can't hardly see him, he's black and white, so it's seeing something out of the corner of her eye, which she interpreted as that was Slender Man, and she said Morgan saw the same thing.
I want to give you what I believe could be an alternate rationale for Anissa's actions that day. She was close friends with Morgan.
Yes.
And did she tell you that as well when you talked to her?
Yeah, she described their relationship as, best friends. I don't know if she used the word best friend, but she said she clung to her for dear life, which indicates a very close relationship.
Did you consider that maybe she was doing it because she did not want to lose that close relationship with Morgan?
You consider, I guess, all the possibilities, but there didn't seem to ever be a threat that Morgan wasn't going to be her friend, that Anissa needed to do something to maintain the friendship. And, from all the reports, Morgan was very much shunned by her peers. And people thought she was weird and odd, and they didn't want to, the teachers described her as nobody wanted to sit next to her or do projects with her, so if Anissa didn't believe these things, she would likely be much more similar to those peers that didn't want to be around Morgan, because Morgan was odd, and at 12, that was very odd behavior that people didn't want to be associated with. So I didn't see any evidence that she couldn't maintain this friendship if she didn't go through with the plan. And I think if she didn't believe in this system that was in place, that she might not have maintained herself that friendship with Morgan.
Okay. Now, I want to talk to you now about just how they plan to harm Payton.
I think at this point we're going to take a brief recess. I think that's an appropriate breaking point. So let's take about a 15-minute recess then. All right, I think we're all here. Thank you. Please be seated. We'll be back on the record then in State versus Weier, same case number and appearances. Dr. Westendorf is on the stand and under oath and being questioned by Attorney Smith.
And Doctor, I believe when we left off, I had started to ask if there was anything about the way that Anissa and Morgan planned to harm Payton that affects your opinions.
With regards to planning, or there were essentially 3 plans that they developed, not all at one time, but the first time it occurred in the middle of the night. They were going to wake up. They believed that, if someone is sleeping, they can't scream, and that off of the Slender Man or the creepypasta website, you never want to kill someone when their eyes are open because then you see your reflection. So that was the first plan. But Morgan said, no, not now. I know what you're like when you're sleepy, or I know what you're like at this time. So they went back to bed. They continued talking about it that next morning when they got up, despite engaging in what would seem like normal 12-year-old behaviors, playing dress up, playing silly putty, answering those questions on the websites. They were contemplating, how are we going to do this? They continued to develop another plan. And at that point, then they developed the plan of going into the restroom in the park. They get to the park, and while they're trying to do this, Anissa was supposed to be the first person, or was supposed to be the person who would do it. She couldn't do it. And so the knife gets handed back and forth. They tell the victim to go to sleep, because remember the eye, not to look in the eye. Well, the victim's like, I'm not going to sleep now. It's, they're in the bathroom. They just tried to, this plan isn't working. It's not, they hit her head against the wall, and I don't know how hard, but they hit her head against the wall, maybe to knock her out, which didn't work. I mean, the victim was even understanding that something is odd going on. And Anissa described this as, Morgan was having nervous breakdowns. Those are her words. And so she was trying to help her, calm her down. And so then when they sent out the victim, they came up with another plan. Okay, what are we going to do next? Let's go into the woods. Let's play hide and seek in the woods. And so they did that. And again, there was a bunch of back and forth. Anissa couldn't do it. She didn't want the knife. She couldn't do it. And that's when, unfortunately, Morgan had it and harmed the victim. This tells me that they were compelled to follow through with this plan of killing the victim and heading up to Slender Mansion. As inept as it was driven. They were compelled. They had to continue on with this plan. And I think that's what all these different attempts or plans, to try and harm the victim indicate.
And you said just a moment ago that, again, Anissa was provided the knife and she could not do it.
I'm going to rewind this question because I just want some clarity. My response, actually, Morgan said the opposite, that she followed the plan because she didn't want to lose Anissa as a friend, was in response to the testimony, not to chicken shite. So that's who I'm talking to. But I was outside having a cigarette, so I had to type it in the chat instead of pushing pause. Let me rewind so we can hear his full conversation.
Again, Anissa was...
Or plans, to try and harm the victim indicate.
And you said just a moment ago that, again, Anissa was provided the knife and she could not do it. Anissa did, though, tell Morgan to do it, when Morgan said, I'm not going to do it until you tell me to do it. And how does that affect your belief that there was that delusion that Anissa was suffering from?
I think that goes to sort of, if you imagine like a crescendo. I mean, these events are transpiring, and these are traumatic events that are occurring, that they're trying to enact this traumatic plan, and this is starting to overwhelm her, and she said she couldn't look at it. She just wanted it over with. She wanted to go home, but eventually later she says, I couldn't go home because Morgan might become a proxy and then come back and kill me and finish the plan. So it was this crescendo to this event, to the harm that was caused, and it was just so overwhelming for her. And again, all this stress is leading up to this moment, and now this moment's happened, and now they have to continue on with the plan. I mean, really, that's not the end game. That was the middle of it. Now they had the next act of they had to walk to Slender Mansion, which at that time, at least initially, they believed was almost 4,000 miles away.
Okay, there's a part right here that I want to address really quick. Hold on, I think it's right here. It might be right before. Yes, let's hear this. Let me rewind just a little bit.
Become a proxy and then come back and kill me and finish the plan.
Here's the thing. So she was concerned that Morgan might become a proxy and then come back and finish the plan. These are what this psychologist is testifying to is Anissa's belief at the time of the murder, right? How could Morgan become a proxy and then come back and finish the plan, which would be to unalive her, if Anissa had to be told during the interrogation that I don't understand this. She had to be told during the interrogation that Payton survived. So during all of this time, wouldn't Anissa be under the impression that the plan was complete? Or is what she said, because then she talks about going to Slender Mansion, right? So is the whole plan not complete until they get to the mansion? I don't know.
So it was this crescendo to this event and, or, to the harm that was caused. And it was just so overwhelming for her. And again, all this stress is leading up to this moment. And now this moment's happened. And now they have to continue on with the plan. I mean, that's not the end game. That was the middle of it. Now they had the next act of they had to walk the Slender Mansion, which at that time, at least initially, they believed was almost 4,000 miles away.
Okay. And I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the preparation for that, what they thought was a 4,000-mile walk. As you know, they had a purse, and that purse was filled with 2 water bottles, some granola bars, sanitation napkins. They didn't have a GPS, they didn't have a phone, they didn't have a tent, no blanket, they had no money with them. That part of the preparation, how does that have an effect on the conclusions you reached?
I mean, they were 12 years old, okay? So it obviously was, this is part of, the frontal cortex not being completely developed, right? It's hard for kids this age to see long range plans, right? And by their definition of a long range plan is they think that being friends for 6 months is like forever. I mean, you guys remember, you were all in junior high. Remember, you just, you have a relationship in middle school and it lasts 3 months and you think that's an eternity, right? So, I mean, that's part and parcel, I think, of being 12, right? But they obviously had some, just because water bottles can be refilled. Okay. It's not like they brought soda with them, a can of soda or nothing to drink. I mean, was it were they wholly, completely prepared to travel I think it's like 300 miles to Nicolay? No, they weren't, but they're also 12 years old.
To some extent, it shows that they're 12-year-old girls who don't, that's not a plan to walk 4,000 miles, right?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Westendorf. That's part of being 12.
The other thing that they had was pictures of their families. They did not believe they were coming home. And it wasn't because of the police. They didn't believe they were coming home because of Slender Man. They were going to be living in this forest. She said they didn't take money. You don't need money at Slender Mansion. He takes care of your needs. Slender Man was going to be, they were going to be with him, right? They were going to be these recluses, I think she said, that lived in Slender Mansion. I don't know if they had a real conceptual formulation of what Slender Mansion looked like. They just knew it was in Nicolay National Forest. I didn't hear any talk about what the house looks like. They just would know it, right? And that's part of the delusion. There's always cracks in the delusion that the person who doesn't have it says, well, what about this? Remember, there's no surgery scars on you. So how could you have had surgery? That part doesn't matter. It's the whole delusional scheme that was important. They were going to be heading to Slender Mansion.
And I want to go back to something I think that we touched on a little bit earlier. During her interviews, Anissa started to divorce herself from the delusion a bit after she was taken into custody. Did you, when you watched the video, did you see a little bit of that?
There was a little bit. I mean, she certainly, when she described Slender Man and Slender Mansion, she looked like she believed it. I mean, the way that she talked about it. But I think there were some comments about, you know, he can't be real or he must not be real. And what I think what happened there is this was such a traumatic event. I mean, clearly for the victim, this is traumatic for these girls as well. And it sort of, you know, what I'd say shook the tree of Anissa. And some of the leaves, some of the delusional leaves started falling off, saying, wait a minute, what is happening here? Now, I mean, I still believe some of those leaves still exist on this tree, based on what I talked about before, what she shared with me. But I think that incident and that attack shook that tree enough for her to start to really, you know, the confusion for her, I think we're starting to see at that point. But there, you know, certainly during the interview, she certainly describes what they were going to do, how they had to do it, what must be done, the fear about her harming their family. You know, that was still there too.
Okay. And I want to show a few clips from her interview just to let you look at those and maybe provide some information about how these, what I'm going to show you, impacted your conclusions.
While you're working on obtaining the video clips, is this from the same source as the previous clip you showed?
It is.
So we'll be able to have a way to identify the location of the clip?
Yes.
And you have the data that you'll file?
Correct.
All right, thank you.
You shouldn't, you know, I'm just going to let him do it because I can't help him here. Watch, an error occurred.
That one doesn't work once you go to it. See if the third one works.
We like played around a little bit. Morgan kind of started freaking out a little bit, so I said, Bella, I need to talk to Morgan. She's freaking out a little bit.
What was she freaking out about?
Silly. She had never done that before. She stabbed apples before.
Okay.
It was like chopsticks.
Okay.
But she had never actually cut a flesh wound into somebody.
How was she freaking out? What was she doing?
She said, I can't do this. I'm too scared. You have to.
Did Bella hear this?
No, Bella was outside. I told her to go outside and play.
Yeah, she was in the bathroom.
And then Morgan started freaking out, so I had to hug her and calm her down.
Okay, so what Anissa's talking about there is what happened in the bathroom when they were going to stab Payton in the bathroom, and Morgan couldn't do it and started freaking out. And you saw that before, and you factored that into the conclusions that you reached in your reports, right?
Yes.
Hey, Kimmy C, good to see you, babe. Thanks for being here.
And what does that show you? I mean, what does that help you in your conclusions to form opinions about?
Well, it helps to set what was going on for the girls at the time, that this was an extremely stressful event, and that Morgan this is, I think, what Anissa's talking about, the nervous breakdowns, as she describes them to me. I think this is what she's talking about, and that she was trying to calm her down and soothe her. Again, that's the secondary or the submissive's sort of job in this relationship. It seemed as though she was trying to help Morgan, and this is an example of her doing that, even though this is very traumatic for the both of them.
I said, hey, we could go to the park and kill her in one of the bathroom stalls.
When was that said, last night or this morning?
This morning.
Was Bella around at that time?
Yeah, we were playing dress up, and Bella was putting on a costume in the bathroom, a princess gown. That'd be fun. So Morgan said, we have to kill Bella today. And I was like, but can't we stay another night and do it tonight? Because I was still kind of scared and kind of hopeful.
Scared and kind of hopeful. What do you mean by that?
Like, I was scared because A, I would never see my family again. And B, I was kind of hopeful to prove that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't seeing things. Because even I saw Slender a few times. I think that was probably my mind playing tricks on me.
When was this before the party that you saw Slender? You've seen him before?
Twice. Once, well, they were both on a bus. We ride the same bus to and from school. So we were like talking on the bus. I look out the window and I see this supposed thing standing like this with tendrils, looks exactly like a tree. They were gone like that. And I told Morgan, and so I actually thought that he was real because I saw him.
And you call it tentacles?
Tendrils.
Tendrils.
Okay, in that clip, Anissa's describing seeing Slender Man before the stabbing occurred. But she also says in that clip, that could have been my mind probably playing tricks on me. So, what does that tell you?
These are the moments where that tree is shaking. When she first said Slender, she went slender. But then she says, I was scared because he was going to kill my family, and I was scared, about all of this stuff. This was very scary for her. She believed him. She wanted to prove the critics wrong, right? I thought that was her second point.
See, this is where the question comes in for me, okay? How do, and I want to know this answer. How do forensic psychologists, mental health professionals, how do they differentiate between a delusion and a manipulation when there are statements made like the ones Anissa from the clip they just played, where she uses air quotes to describe Slender Man, and it's I would like to know how they make that, how they differentiate between the two. I'm just curious. I'm not being critical. I'm actually genuinely curious.
She wanted to prove them wrong. This goes to the fact that she believed, and her desire to prove these people wrong, that he was real. I've seen him. Was very compelling to her, and that she needed to continue with this plan. Now, these are crucial moments right here where you see that she's trying to make sense of this. I mean, this is an extremely traumatic event and causing her to think, what is going on?
Also, that when she's talking about seeing Slender Man, right? It's unclear from that clip when in time what she's referring to, because there was an incident on the bus where she told Morgan that she saw Slender Man. And then she sent that email and she apologized for lying, yada, yada, yada. I messaged Dr. B. Dr. B was my first message. But we'll get there. It's Friday, she's at work, so she'll respond. But I understand that they are trying to look at the whole picture, right? And in its entirety. And it makes sense. And I'm looking at the picture in its entirety as well. I'm looking at the entirety of Anissa's statement. And this is where I'm left with, how do you differentiate between, that's why I'm asking the question, based on everything that she said. How is it that she was able to start to question this delusion so soon? This stabbing happened at 9:30 in the morning. By 2:30 in the afternoon, they were sitting in the cop shop. That's where my question is.
right now.
Morgan and I rode the bus to our house. We went to my house so I could pick up my things. I also picked up 2 pictures of my family.
Okay.
One of my mom and one of my siblings and me when we were really young.
How did you do it?
Memories.
Okay.
And then we went around grabbing stuff like Kudos granola bars and water bottles. The water bottles are mine.
Okay. So you were packing a bag to...
So she's talking about her preparations again, the things that she got together for her 4,000-mile walk to Slender Man, and the pictures that she packed. And again, that helped form your conclusions in what way?
You know, it formed the conclusion that she didn't plan on coming back. She planned on being gone from her family. Not related to being picked up by the police, but being gone from her family because she was going to be living in Slender Mansion. And at some point, the delusion incorporates that she's protecting her family, that if she doesn't go up there, he'll come back and kill her family. So there's a little bit, there's multiple parts to this delusion, but she didn't believe she'd be back to see them. That's why she left the note on her phone as well, saying, I'm not the perfect daughter for you. I think she was giving away her worldly possessions to her parents. She didn't intend to be at home.
When my friend was walking away, Morgan said that she wouldn't do the deed until I said she could, so I kind of started to walk away, and then I said no, and Morgan said, don't be afraid, I'm only a little kitty cat, and then lunged for Payton, the ballistic.
So that's Anissa. She's talking about not being able to do it herself, but again, saying to Morgan, do it. And how does that, what impact did that have on your conclusions?
It goes to their relationship, the strength of their relationship. Morgan says, I can't do this unless you tell me, so Anissa's stepping in at this point to assist with Morgan. And it also, I guess it goes to the fact that, this was becoming overwhelming for Anissa. She said she had to turn around and walk away, and she just, she said the words.
And does that also in any way show any insight into her belief that it needed to be done?
I think the whole series of events.
I'll object to the question this meeting. Overruled.
Can I have the question again, please?
Does this also have, I guess, some insight into Anissa's belief that this needed to be done?
As I've stated earlier, I thought all of the behaviors that occurred during this time frame on the 31st just goes to show the compelling nature of what they felt they needed to do.
This is the last video clip I'll show.
If we saw him, actually, we think we see him sometimes.
Okay.
Like when we were walking up to where we were going, we saw him, I saw him out of the corner of my eye on this side.
Okay.
And then Morgan said she heard a twig crack when no one was moving.
So today, after everything happened with Bella, when you guys were walking, you thought you saw Slender as you were
This
walking?
was after Morgan had stabbed her.
Okay. So you thought that possibly you would see the Slender?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay. And can you tell me how that played a part in your conclusions?
I think it just further supports that she believed Slender Man was real. I think this is the incident, when she was describing it to me, they put the X in the tree. And I think you've seen pictures of what's supposed to be Slender Man's face, and there's X's for eyes. I think that's all part of what she was telling me 2 years later, is that she felt she saw him out of the corner of her eye, and that Morgan saw it as well. So again, you have just, this traumatic event that occurred. She's still believing that Slender Man is real on this walk, and that she's moving towards the Slender Mansion.
And you still have Exhibit X in front of you?
I do.
And the information contained in Exhibit X is accurate?
Yes.
So are there any changes that you would make to your opinions and conclusions today?
No.
Judges, if I haven't done so, I would like to move in Exhibits W and X into evidence.
Any objections? No. Receive.
And Doctor, just a few more questions. Did you eventually receive copies of Dr. Caldwell's and Dr. Van Rybrook's not guilty by reasons of mental disease and defect reports?
I did.
And again, did you receive those before or after you submitted your report to the court?
I received it afterwards.
And did you review those reports in their entirety?
I did.
Did their conclusions and opinions have any impact or effect on the opinions and conclusions that you hold?
It didn't alter any of my opinions or conclusions at all.
Okay. The last, well, there's a few more questions I want to ask you, but the opinions that you hold and that you testified to today, do you hold those opinions to a reasonable degree of professional certainty within the field of psychology?
Yes.
Okay. And the last thing I want to ask you, I mean, there was some mention earlier about the belief in Santa Claus. Is the delusion that Anissa suffered from the same as a magical belief in Santa Claus?
You know, I would describe it differently. I mean, certainly we share with our children this belief in Santa Claus. It's culturally accepted, this belief in Santa Claus. But if you look at adults who have delusions, some of them have delusions about being Jesus or being God. And so what they do is they take what's been culturally accepted, figures in our society, and they incorporate themselves into it. This is very similar here with this delusion of Slender Man, is that they've incorporated themselves into it. Because Slender Man, despite adults maybe not knowing about it, it appeared to be part of the culture of middle school. At least there seemed to be a lot of people who knew about Slender Man. And so that was part of their culture, and they incorporated themselves into that culture. You know, the magical thinking towards Santa Claus, I said before, we all know this. Kids start doubting it, right? As they reach a certain age and their brains are developing, they can start challenging some of those concepts. We have to remember these girls were 12 as well. Morgan was much more susceptible. Her magical thinking took on a delusional quality earlier, right? She had delusions about Harry Potter and Voldemort and Snape. Anissa still had that magical thinking as well. This occurred over a short period of time, you know, within 6 months, 7 months. That it's different than Santa Claus because they were incorporating themselves into this whole genre of Slender Man.
I don't have any other questions, Judge.
All right, thank you. Cross-examination.
Doctor, I guess I'll start there. You said this is part of the middle school culture, right?
It appeared as though other kids knew about Slender Man.
There are no other cases of any other 12-year-olds trying to kill somebody as part of a belief in Slender Man, are there?
Not that I've ever heard of.
Okay. I want to make sure that I understand your opinion that they could not conform their conduct to the requirements of the law, right?
Yes.
That's your opinion.
That is my opinion.
And that's based upon them wanting to become proxies, right?
Yes.
And based upon them fearing that if they don't go through with this killing, Slender Man's going to hurt them or their families, right?
Overall, yes.
A belief that they were in some danger.
Correct.
And you're
All right, before he asks his next question, this is really important. And this is the way that I was trying to put it a couple of days ago when we were talking about Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell. And you did it such a great job, Chicken Shite. Chicken Shite says, I give her credit for admitting God and Jesus are concepts we culturally accept. Not many would say that openly in fear of being judged, but I think most doctors agree on that, LOL. This is what I was trying to talk about with respect to Chad and Lori Daybell, okay? God and Jesus are concepts that are culturally acceptable, okay? And so for Chad, I need to understand with Chad and Lori especially, because so many people believe that she might have, I think it's called hyper-religiosity. But I need to I need to know where that line is, right? And how do mental health professionals determine hyper-religiosity or a delusion versus faith? how does that get determined? And see, here's this, and as it pertains to the criminal justice system. And the reason why this is important is because anytime they're evaluating a defendant in these cases, right? The person being interviewed has a motive to lie. And that's where it gets tricky for me. And I just want like a good, explanation, a narrative, because I don't think that we're not going to get that type of explanation really in a courtroom setting, because again, they're limited. Their answers are limited by the questions that are asked. They can't just, spontaneously give information. They have to be asked a question. And so that's where I'm curious about. Hey, Tim, good to see you. Welcome back. All right, let's keep going.
Your opinion is that they were able to appreciate the wrongfulness of his conduct, right?
Certainly, they seem, they questioned that, could they get the electric chair? Now that's juxtaposed with them also saying, am I going to miss school on Monday? But they had a concept that this was wrong, the killing was wrong.
You testified earlier that this shared delusional disorder is very rare, correct?
Correct.
And even among shared delusional disorder cases, one between two friends is even rarer, right?
Of the cases I read, I didn't see one between two children who were friends.
Okay. Typically, you testified that it's spousal. That's one of the typical types, correct?
Yes.
Maybe between siblings, right?
Yes.
Maybe between parent-child.
Absolutely.
All of those would be more common than between friends and even friends that are children, right?
Those are the cases that I was able to, that I've read about. I mean, there was one exception. There was an individual and a dog that they thought was part of it, which is truly exceptional.
It is interesting, the rarity that exists in this specific diagnosis, number one, but number two, that you would find it in a friend at school. Like you talk about a needle in a haystack.
This, I didn't read any that included two children like this.
You said a couple of times that Anissa was trying to make sense of what happened, right?
Yes.
She didn't ever say to you, Dr. Westendorf, I'm trying to make sense of what happened, did she?
No.
That's your perception, is that she's trying to make sense of what happened, right?
Yes, those are my adult words on probably an unconscious process, not something she can comprehend that's going on at the time.
And you saw some clips from the interview with Detective Trusoni about Anissa saying she may have seen Slender Man, and she certainly believes in Slender Man, right?
Yes.
But by the end of that interview, she says he's a work of fiction, and I believe that people who say that they have seen him in person have read creepypasta and then recall memories of strange trees instead of the Slender, because I know that was one of the cases on the bus. I looked back at the tree, and it was strange.
This is a fantastic point that he's about to make. And I like this question. And I'm very interested in her answer, but I do have to pause for fair use commentary. All right, here we go.
That's what she told Detective Trusoni.
Yes.
I'm going to just go through a few of the other things that she told you. She told you that in October of 2013, she was desperate.
Hold on, I'm gonna pause this really quickly because it is the phrase work of fiction. Certainly, Anissa, it's clear from, and I don't think anybody disputes this, anybody that's had anything to do with her on any level, whether it be evaluating her or just day to day, she's extremely intelligent and she's very articulate. It's her putting it so succinctly that gives me pause as to this diagnosis of shared delusion. I'm not saying that she clearly doesn't have some psychological mental health issue going on. It's just that her putting it in that way so succinctly and so definite doesn't actually leave room for one to interpret that she might still believe in Slender Man. That's what I'm saying. And this is a guess, Neat. Neat said that case of the missing Michigan family last fall seems suspicious for a shared delusion situation. They were located and allowed to continue because they weren't doing anything illegal. There's another case too that is it Gray Rock? Do you guys know what I'm talking about? I'll look it up later, but not right now. Let's keep going because I can't. If I stop listening to this to look something else up, I'm not gonna remember my point, and I'm gonna miss the testimony, and I want to hear it. So here we go.
She told you that in October of 2013, she was desperate for a friend, right?
Yes,
She had switched to the middle school, and all the kids from her elementary school went to a different middle school, right?
right,
She went to Horny, right?
yes,
She had nobody there that she was friends with, right?
correct.
She met Morgan, right?
She did,
And she told you that she clung to Morgan for dear life.
right.
It was Anissa that introduced Morgan to creepypasta, right?
It was,
And it was Morgan who told Anissa that they should become proxies.
it was Morgan that told Anissa, yes.
You know, the other thing that I wonder about, okay, initially I was under the impression that Anissa started at the middle school because she transferred in, like they moved, but that wasn't the case. She started there her beginning of her 6th grade year. Like she was there the whole year. I would imagine in Wisconsin, when does school start? Sometime end of August, maybe the beginning of September. So what changed in October? What changed from the very beginning of the school year to October that they then became friends? What happened? What made how did Morgan and Anissa become acquainted? I'm curious about that too.
Yes, yes,
And Morgan told Anissa they should kill Payton in order to become proxies.
yes,
Anissa said that she didn't want Morgan to feel crazy, so she said yeah, right?
that's what she said, yes,
She also said that she didn't think Morgan was serious, right?
correct,
And that they wouldn't literally try to kill Payton, right? That's what Anissa
right,
said.
that's what Anissa said to me in 2016,
They began planning, right?
yes,
Anissa told you that it was exciting to talk about this, right?
yes,
Like discovering something new, right?
yes,
They spoke about these plans almost every day.
yes, I believe on the bus every day,
There were times that Anissa thought about calling it off, though, right?
yes,
But she felt we're too far in. Morgan's been planning this whole thing out and building this up, and I don't want to pull the rug out from under her, right?
yes,
She just followed Morgan because Morgan was doing most of the work.
yes,
And again, she said, I didn't think we were going to try to kill her, right?
right,
She told you some different things about Slender Man as far as whether she believed in him or not, right?
yes,
Well, at one point she said, I never really believed in him, right?
right,
And at another point, your report says that Anissa told you she estimated half of her believed in Slender Man.
right,
And they want to, you took very detailed notes while you interviewed Anissa. Is that fair to say?
yes,
And you did that because you wanted to be able to refer to those notes when you wrote your report, right?
I type my notes because it's easier for me, it's faster for me, yes,
Okay. And you go back and use those notes in creating your report, right?
I do. I can't use everything that's in it, or my reports would be very lengthy, but I use the salient features of my notes in the reports. Absolutely.
The most important things from your notes go in your report.
Right. I mean, several of those things can be repeated several times, but yeah.
Okay.
While I understand the state's point with this question, I have to say that it makes me feel some type of way, right? So whenever I make a video and I am paring down a huge case with not a huge case, a case with many, many details that occurred over, years, right? For example, the Todd Mullis. I am summarizing the case. And when I go to summarize the case, I'm trying to give an overall objective, no non-biased summarization of what occurred, right? My goal every time I do something like that is I'm going to put in the important parts, right? I'm going to put in the parts that are referenced in like the post-conviction relief hearing, and not just the parts that are beneficial to Todd, but also what the state's points. Okay. And so it would make me feel some type of way if somebody came to me and said at the end of all of this, this is highly biased. You're supporting a convicted murderer. That would irritate me. So it does make me feel like some type of way hearing her report being, referred to in that way, as if she's just tailoring her report to the parts that benefit Anissa. And I don't think that she's done that.
I'm going to show you, Doctor, what's marked as Exhibit 4. Do you recognize that as a copy of your notes?
Yes.
And I guess I would refer you to page 6, paragraph 6. I think that's where you get the information about Anissa at one point saying, well, I half believed in him and I half didn't believe he was real. You see that on page 6?
Oh, yes. 45% believed that paragraph.
Right. So she really told you 45% believed it and 55% she didn't believe it, right?
Typically, my question isn't in there, but I ask for, what percent of you believed it, what percent of you didn't believe it.
And I guess it's kind of nitpicky. It is kind of half, but 45% versus 55%.
Right. Correct.
But after that, she says, there were things that I could explain that I don't think Supernatural could explain. I didn't want to tell Morgan because I didn't want to make her feel crazy, right?
Yes.
So she's talking about Slender Man, right?
Yes.
And then at another point, she tells you, I did believe in him, but by May, I started to think it was crazy, right?
I don't see that in this paragraph, but certainly
No.
she did say that.
I'm sorry, not referring to you
Oh, okay, I'm
anymore,
sorry.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But she did at some point tell you that by
She did.
May, I started to think it was crazy.
She did.
You didn't have any issues in your interview with Anissa regarding whether or not she was competent or not, did you?
No.
No concerns about that?
No, if you mean like if she could talk with me, if she was, you don't mean competent to stand trial?
Well, either one.
Any of them? No, I mean, I didn't, she was well aware why I was there, what we were going to be talking about. She understood what was going on, certainly.
And had you ever reviewed Dr. Caldwell's report where he determined she was not competent to stand trial?
The competency report, I know I believe I had three competency reports on Anissa. And I believe I was able to see the competency evaluation.
Okay. Do you recall whether one of those was Dr. Caldwell's?
I'm just going to look up because there's been a lot of, yes, it was a report dated 12/5/2014, authored by Dr. Michael Caldwell.
I want to ask you some questions about, thank you,
Thank you. Attorney Smith, redirect.
thank you, Doctor, I just want to ask you some questions about, just kids and their, sort of their beliefs and what it might mean to cause, a death. You've had occasions to actually unfortunately discuss
I
that
guess I'll
issue.
object, Judge. This is beyond the scope of the cross. It's.
Yeah,
if you
I
wanna
was
go into
just
this
going to
area, you
say,
can go
this
on direct.
isn't, hold
I
on a
don't yet know
second.
what he's going to say.
I was just going to say the same thing. It's just beyond the scope. All right.
I heard the word death and cause of death, but I'd like to get the question out, and then I'll address the objection. Sorry.
I was just going to ask you, Judge, generally what you've come to perceive as what some kids, younger kids, might believe that happens when you die.
It's a big question.
Oh, wait, now, there was an objection. Are you
Oh.
renewing the objection?
I maintain the objection,
Okay.
yes.
All right,
Sorry.
all right, all right. Well, I think, I'm satisfied that's beyond the scope of the cross-examination.
Okay. Well, that came to my mind, Judge, because I thought on cross, Attorney Packer was asked the doctor what Anissa thought was going to happen if she helped kill Payton.
I recall that conversation or that question. It's still your question or the area you've about to move into, it seems to, I'm satisfied is beyond what was Mr. Sopakowicz's cross. Now, at this type of trial, of course, if you made a motion to direct the court's attention to an aspect of the case, I'd consider it.
So I'm asking the court to allow her to give her opinion on that in light of that question that was asked earlier in the
So
cross-examination.
you're asking actually to reopen the direct exam?
Yes.
All right, all right. Mr. Sopakowicz, any comments?
No?
No, all right. I'll permit you to reopen the direct exam and go forward.
Thank you. And can you, Doctor, answer that question?
So kids may not, they don't have a good understanding of what death and dying means. In my notes, from what she talked about with me, that there was some sense of, it's like a video game. They would just sort of fade away when that happens in a video game. And then her next comment was, I didn't know it would take so long. She's 12. She doesn't have a good concept of what dying and death, what that really means, in the grand scheme of things. There are kids, very young kids who have committed suicide, and they don't have a concept of what it means that they no longer be around. They think they can resolve whatever's going on at the time and then move forward. Again, it's their brain development, right? I mean, the neuronal pathways that develop to help us with impulse control and executive functioning and making decisions and being able to analyze situations, it really begins in puberty, right? And at 12, she was prepubescent. She hadn't really, that process was not, she wasn't very far along in that process that they had started. And that's why kids, they can believe in the magical thinking of various characters. They can believe in that dying is like a video game, and you just start over again.
And then I wanted to, if I can, ask questions about comments that Anissa made to you when you met with her in September of 2016. She began to divorce herself from the delusions when you met with her.
Yes, clearly.
And one of the things that you did was you not only looked at the recorded interview she gave to Detective Trusani, but again, you looked at her account of the events when she spoke with other doctors close to the time period in which this took place.
Yes.
Okay, and when she spoke to those other doctors, well, let me give you an example. One of the reports you looked at a report authored by Dr. Antoinette Kavanaugh. Her report's dated May 22nd, 2015, but she met with Anissa prior to that date. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And do you recall whether the account she gave to Dr. Kavanaugh of what happened, was it consistent or inconsistent with what she told Detective Trusani?
For the most part, it was consistent.
And you looked at reports dated September 5th, 2014, September 14th, 2014, December 12th, 2014, prepared by Dr. Anthony Jurek. And she gave accounts of what happened on the date of the offense to that doctor as well. Isn't that correct?
She did.
And was her account of what happened to Dr. Jurek consistent or inconsistent with what she told Detective Trusani?
In all of these reports, it was consistent. The way she discussed her beliefs and the beliefs in Slender Man.
Okay. And so those are both psychologists, right?
They are, yes.
And Dr. Michael Caldwell, Dr. Robert Roski, they're both psychologists as well?
Dr. Roski is a psychiatrist.
Okay, thank you. And they both spoke with Anissa about the events that happened on the date of the offense as well?
I believe so, yes.
And as far as you're aware, were her reports to those two doctors consistent or inconsistent with what she shared with Detective Trusani?
I believe they're consistent. My memory of Dr. Roski's, as it was dealing primarily with a competency issue, I don't remember as much detail in that report, but otherwise, it was consistent.
Okay. So how did that impact your belief about what Anissa believed on the date that she participated in the stabbing of Payton?
That she believed the whole delusional pattern of Slender Man and Slender Nation, and what she needed to do to save herself, save her family. That's consistent, and it makes sense to me based on my training and experience and education that at this point she's trying to, what I say is, make sense of what has happened and trying to pull herself back from not wanting to look, quote, crazy in her words.
I don't have any other questions, Judge.
All right, additional cross. I heard you again, Doctor, say that Anissa believed she needed to do this to save herself and her family, right?
Yes.
And by this, we mean stab and kill Payton, correct?
Yes.
And your opinion that she wasn't able to conform her conduct to the requirements of the law, that she was compelled, as you've said, was because she needed to kill Payton to save herself and her family, right? In part.
In part, my conclusions are based that all of her behavior was driven on this delusional belief about Slender Man, about proxies, about what you needed to do to become a proxy. And through the course of on that day, it appears as though she begins talking about the going to harm my family. I don't want them to harm my family. I don't want Morgan to go alone because she'll become a proxy and come back and harm the family. So it's, delusions are never neat, right? There's many parts of them, and all of that together is what drove the behavior.
But you did just testify that prior to stabbing Payton, she believed that she needed to do it to save herself and her family. I can have the reporter read back your answer.
Right.
To that question,
I guess what I would say is, when was the specific moment that she believed that Slender Man would come back and harm her family? I'm not sure about that. But I know that it was part and parcel of this Slender Man delusion. Whether she read about what he might do if you don't become a proxy, I'm not sure where that piece of it came. For example, she talked about on the Slender Man website, you could read, kill somebody when their eyes are closed because you don't want to see yourself in their eyes. So I'm not exactly sure what she all took from the website and when exactly she knew it. But my opinion is based on the fact that she believed in this entire delusional world of Slender Man.
I think you testified earlier, part of what she believed was that at the time Payton was stabbed and they tried to kill her, they did it because they were afraid Slender Man was going to harm them or their families, right?
If that was part of my answer, yes.
Part of what you based your opinion, right?
Yes.
And I guess I'll clarify that. I think we understood each other, but that was something that Anissa believed, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Nothing else.
Any further direct?
Just a few more questions. Doctor, you said that what you do know is that her behavior, it was driven by her delusional belief system,
Yes.
right? And does it matter, in your opinion, whether her belief that Slender Man was going to come back and kill her and her family before or after the act?
The biggest component to me is that she believed this entire system and incorporated herself into this entire world. Where the specific beliefs come in and at what time is, I guess, I don't want to say less relevant, but, you know, came at different times that I specifically don't know exactly when they came into play. But again, I'm looking at the totality, the overall. She had this belief, and that's what drove the behavior and compelled her to continue on with the plan.
I guess the last question I wanted to, ask is it common for a delusional belief system to be just like neatly presented, described, and is that, or does it morph at times? Does delusional beliefs, are they easy to just, categorize and explain and figure out?
All delusions are different. When you're working with someone with a delusional disorder and they're expressing their delusions, there's going to be holes in their delusions. I mean, there's just holes in it, right? Because it's a delusion. It's not reality. And so even if you try to ask questions about it, you can't make this a nice, neat package. And it changes, like I said, over time. It's going to change or morph as they start, or as the individual starts incorporating other parts into the delusion. So it doesn't maintain an entire consistency. It doesn't stay the same the entire time, and it's never just a entirely consistent, system.
Thank you, Judge.
All right, any further cross?
No, thank you, Judge.
All right, with that, then, our examination then of Dr. Westendorf is complete. Is Dr. Westendorf under subpoena?
She is, Judge. We'll release her from the subpoena.
Any objections? No. All right.
All right. So I find this testimony absolutely fascinating. And the last thing I'm going to say, because we're going to be done for today and then we'll pick back up Monday, is this. All right. The one thing that Anissa has going for her at this point, in my mind, is unlike other people, yes, Letitia Stout, I'm looking at you, right? When she was evaluated, up until this point, there has not been testimony that she showed any signs of malingering. Where Letitia Stout, when she changed her verdict to not guilty changed her plea to not guilty by reason of insanity, she was evaluated and literally checked every box of everything that you could possibly have as a symptom. And, so that then negates the test. So at this point, she doesn't I haven't heard anything that says that she was attempting to feign or fake or malinger, right? So she has that going for her. And I don't think, for me personally, it's actually a question of whether or not she has some type of potential personality disorder or mental health issue. That's not really the question for me. For me, really, the question is the second prong, that she could not, how did they put it? 'Cause it's not comport. It's another C word. But comport, it's the same thing. She couldn't alter her behavior to stop what she was doing because she appreciated the wrongness of it. So that's where I'm at today. It might change. I mean, we still have quite a bit. We have like a third day of testimony, and I actually think that might have to be broken down into two parts. I have to go back and look. But then, I mean, there's more to this. There's a situation that occurs during deliberation, and then there's the final verdict, and then there's the sentencing phase, which is also there's also testimony, although it's much shorter. It's only like an hour and a half of testimony in total. But anyway, I want to thank each and every one of you guys for being here today. I appreciate it so, so much. If you haven't done so, please do me a favor. Give your girl a thumbs up or a thumbs down, whichever you feel like I deserve. I will see you around these YouTube streets. I still have the Grant Amato, Aaron Goodwin situation to cover, and I'm thinking tonight, but don't quote. I know it definitely won't be Saturday night. I have plans Saturday night, but maybe Sunday night. I don't know yet, but I'll at some point this weekend, I will definitely do a live about that, because my goodness, that bears discussion. But for now, that's all I got for you guys. Have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you later. Bye.
Cause it's Friday, you ain't got no job, and you ain't got shit to do. Well, fuck you.
No malicious content or effort was towards it.
No malicious. Finish her.
Minutes later.
We all do a little mad sometimes.
And you know this, man.